Limit, fetch, and offset. Limit. It is used to constrain the number of rows returned by query. The number of rows returned by query. Assume you have 100 rows and you want to only return 3 rows or 5 rows. You use limit to constrain the number of rows to be returned. We have fetch. Fetch and limit are the same. As you can see in this place, they are the same. But what is the difference between the two? The difference is that fetch is SQL standard, but limit is not SQL standard. So to abide by SQL standard, Postgres supports fetch clause. That means if you go to any of the DBMS, what you mostly see is limit. Like in my SQL, you will see limit all the time. But Postgres went further to implement the real SQL standard, which is what fetch. For historical purpose, fetch was introduced in SQL 2008. Okay, then what is offset? Offset is used to identify the starting point to return rows from a result set. Assume these are the number of rows in a column. This is the first row, second row, third row, fourth row, fifth row, sixth row, seventh row. Assume you want to return everything, but you have to start from the third row. That means the starting will start from here, start counting from here. Or you tell the system that limit it to 4 rows, but that limit you start from the second row or the third row. That means the counting will start from the third row. 1, 2, 3, 4. So only this one will be returned. By default, the starting point is the first row, but we can tell the system to start from another row. Hope this is understood. Thank you for viewing. Using limit or fetch, get the first row from the suppliers table. Okay, the first row from the suppliers table. We are going to go to the suppliers table. So select everything from suppliers, limit 1. That is, only 1 row should be returned. If I run this only, the one I selected, you see I'm returning everything. So if I include this limit now, you see only 1 row is what? Returned. You see the difference? Okay, good. So the same thing, let's see how to use fetch. To use fetch now, we say fetch. What am I fetching? The first row only. Which first? The first one only. If I run this now, the same result. Just like this one. The same result. This is optional. You can remove it. I can remove it now to say return. I'm still having the same result. Okay? But if I want to put one, I can see return it. But because it's just 1 row, return the first row. It's okay. Hope this is understood. Thank you for viewing. Using limit or fetch, get the first 3 rows from the suppliers table. This is different from the first one we did. The first one says just first row. This one, the first 3 rows. Let's go for limit first. If we want to use limit, we just put what? 3. That is the first 3 rows. As you can see in this place, first 3 rows. If we want to use fetch now, remember here before I said you may decide to put one here or you remove it. It's optional. But when it comes to 2, 3, 4, 5, you have to indicate it. If you don't put it, SQL will not know. If I put 2 now, that is the first 2. If I put 5, the first 5. Okay, but the question says what? The first 3. Hope this is understood. Thank you for viewing. Help get the 3rd, the 4th, and the 5th supplier details. Let's first of all run this. We are asked to get what? The 3rd, the 4th, and the 5th. Let me zoom in. It means we should start counting from here. So that this will be 1, 2, 3. That means we are going to offset 2. Then we limit the return to 3. That is, we offset 2 to start from 3. Then we limit what is returning to us to 3. Okay, that means offset 2 rows. Offset 2 rows. As you can see, it starts from the 3rd one to the 5th one. What if we are using limit? The same thing. Just say offset 2 rows. Then you run. As you can see, the same thing. Hope this is understood. Thank you for viewing. Which supplier supplied the 3rd most expensive product? The first thing I want us to do, let's look at all the suppliers. These are all the suppliers. We can't get that information from here. We can only get that information from the products table. Let's look at the products. These are all the products. From the unit price, we can get the most expensive. So if we do descending order, we can see what? Can see that what? This is the most expensive, followed by this one, followed by this 3rd one. And we are looking for this 3rd information. Okay, and the product is Mishi Kobe Nico. and the supplier ID is 4. Okay, if we go back to this place, supplier ID 4 is Tokyo Traders. We don't want to pick this information zigzagly from here and there. We have to use inner join. Which table is common between the suppliers and products? Product table is here, but it is not in suppliers table. But what is common is supplier ID, which is the primary key here. As you can see, PK is also in this place. That is a foreign key in this place. Because this is common between the two tables, we can use this to what? To do the return. Okay. Now let's look at the solution here. The first thing we need to do, we said select the company name because we are looking for the company name. That is the name of the suppliers. If I come back to this place, as you can see in this place, this is called company name, not supplier name. So we have to use the way it is here. So it's other company name, other suppliers table. That's why you see the names of the suppliers. That is the reason why we use that. Okay, supplier name, product name, and unit price. This is in suppliers table. These two are where they are in products table. So we continue to say from suppliers, because this is in suppliers table, in adjoin with products. Why are we in adjoin? Because we know that this is coming from this place. These two are coming from this place. I want to put them in the same output on one ground. Because this supplier ID is common in the two table, that is the supplier ID in products table and supplier ID in suppliers table, they'll have to use it to join them together. Okay. If you want to get the most expensive, we need to do it in reverse order. That is descending. If I have 1, 2, 3, 4, or I have 4, 3, 2, 1, to get the third most expensive, this is the way to get it. That is with descending. But with ascending, we can't get that. So let's continue. Then we now do offset. Why are we do offset? Because we are doing offset because we said once you get them in descending order, we don't want the first one, we don't want the second one, we want the third one. So offset these two, remove them. They start counting from this one. The third one becomes the first one. That is the reason for the offset. After the offset, how many do you want to return? That will be determined by what? By the limit or fetch. Because we are going to return just only one, we say limit 1 or fetch only 1. So if we run this now, we're going to get what? Our result. Let's see. So this is the same thing you saw. If we run this now, as you can see, the name of the company is Tokyo Trader. If I come here now to run only this, as you can see in this place, these are all the information. And this guy is the third one, which is Tokyo Traders. That is the information we are looking for. So when we include everything, we have exactly that particular information. Hope this is understood. Thank you for viewing. Productivity is measured by the number of orders taken by an employee. Who is 1? The 6th most productive employee. 2. The least productive employee. 3. The most productive. 4. The second to the least productive employee. Where are we going to get this information? The name is needed. So the name will come from what? Employees table. The number of orders taken by employees, you can only find that in what? In orders table. So how do you know order taken by each employee? You can only know that by counting the number of what? Customer ID per employee. So you can see in this place now, I say select everything from orders. This is order ID. This is customer ID. This is employee ID. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to come to this place. I say, okay, order by employee ID, comma, also order by customer ID. As you can see in this place, this is the first employee with ID number 1. You can see this is ID number 1, ID number 1, see going down, ID number 1, ID number 1, see going down, see going down, see going down. So many, right? To this place. But if you check this customer ID, you see that we have different customer ID, different customer ID, different customers ID. For what? Just one employee. That means this employee has what? Added orders for different customers. Okay? So what we're going to do now is to come to this place. I simply say, for instance, select, let's use ID for instance. Select employee underscore ID. Then we're going to count customer ID. Okay? what we are doing now, for instance, this one, we will count all these customer ID that fall into this employee ID. Then because we are doing that now, we are counting, we are aggregating, we have to go use what? Group by. Okay? Group by. Before we do this, put group by here. Group by employee underscore ID. So because of that now, we don't need to do this again. We need to remove that. So you can see now, just for employee ID 1, we have 123 orders because we counted the number of customers this person has attended to. Employee with ID number 2 attended to 96 customers. Then employee with ID 3 attended to what? 127 customers. You can see that this is how we can know the most productive and least productive employee. But the name we are asked to get is to get the name of the employee, not the ID of the employee. Because we are going to use the name of the employee, therefore, we have to join this orders table with what? Employees table. Because this name, the name of the employee is not in orders table, it's in what? In employees table. So part of the information is in employees table. The other information, which is the one we are looking at, are what? Are in orders table. So we need to join the two tables together. If I do this now, order by descending, what I'm getting now is different from what I'm looking for. We can get that information from what? From this count. Okay. So therefore, I will come to this place. I will say order by the count. Okay. Descending. Okay. Now, this is the most productive. This is the second to the most productive. Third to the most productive. If I want to know the least productive, now I use ascending. Ascending means this is the least productive, that is employee ID 5. 9 is the second to the least productive. But how are we going to get this information? Because we don't want the ID of the employee, we want the name of the employee. Because of that, we need to what? Do inner join. By removing this one from here, we're going to put first name. Let's say productivity for this one. Say productivity. Okay. As alliance. Okay. Let's come down here. Now I come to this place. From others, inner join employees. Okay. On what? On others dot employee ID is equals to employees dot employee ID. Why am I doing it? Because I know that if you go to employees table, you will see this ID. If you go to others table, you also see the same ID. We need to use the same ID to connect two tables together. So this place now, instead of say order by this count, I can order by this productivity because productivity can represent this guy. Let's run this. Now it's giving me an error. We are not using ID anymore. We are now using what? First name. We're going to put first name in this place. Before we use ID, now we are using first name. So you can see in this place now, we have all this information returned. Instead of ID now, we have names. And this is what ascending order. Now let's go back and check all we need to do. The first one says the 6th most productive employee. The 6th most productive. How do you get that information? That means we need to do descending. As you can see in this place, if I show you the result again, this is the most productive, second, third, fourth, fifth, then sixth. That is Robert. But to do that, we need to offset 5. Offset 5. Once we offset 5, we limit what? 1. Robert. After you remove the 5, first rule, after you remove the first 5. If you want the first 2 after you remove the first 5, you can still do that. But we are asked to put what? Just 1. Also, you can use fetch. Also go ahead and say fetch first rule only. The same thing, Robert. Okay, we can format this. Okay, that is the first one. The next one that says what? The least productive employee. The least productive, you have to use ascending here. This ascending will give us that this is the least productive person, but we need to remove every other person. We don't need to offset. We just return the first one, which is Steve. So you can see Steve is the what? Is the least productive. If we go back now, we say what? The most productive. The most productive without being told, just to remove this, I put descending. So that is Margaret. Then lastly, we say what? The second to the least productive employee. Second to the least, okay? So we need to put ascending here. To the least, we need to offset the first one. After offset, the next what? Roll. And that person is what? Is Anne. If you check here very well, now if I run this, you see? And the second person here is what? Anne, 45. Hope this is understood. Thank you for viewing.